Well, resistance, first of all, it's a big part of what we teach people in adult educational literacy learning at the foundational levels. And what we always say is resistance is expected. If people in continuous improvement think of the people who aren't ready to embrace change as resistors, they might have a different attitude toward them. And it was that I was trying to say, let's be positive when we label people so that we are open to them being positive. And so I think there's things you can do as the CI team or the team lead. If you keep thinking, oh, these ones just aren't there yet. That's all. And that's how I think about it.
Hey everybody, I'm Elizabeth Swan.
And I'm Tracy O'Rourke, and we're from the Just in Time Cafe. Welcome to our podcast. At the cafe, we wrestle with tough questions, we talk to groundbreakers, discuss great books, and get insights from Lean Six Sigma leaders and practitioners who are making a difference in the world.
We let you in on helpful apps, bring you the news, and challenge the status quo so you can build your problem-solving muscles.
So Elizabeth, what is on the last cafe menu of 2024?
Last one of the year, Tracy. Today's highlight is our interview with Tracy Defoe, the Kata coach and adult learning specialist, about how changing a label could make a difference between resistance and acceptance of change. That's going to be a good one. And then for our book buzz segment, we'll dive into a book that breaks down what your brain is up against when you are trying to create. And creativity is something that every one of us is engaged in every day. We are all creating stuff. Then for Q&A, we asked, how do you influence leadership to let go and invite others to build their skills? And it's December, so whether your eggnog is spiked or not, let's get into this.
Well, where's the spiked eggnog? I want some.
Bring it on.
Next up, it's Book Buzz.
The last book of the year is one we both recently read called The War of Art, Break Through the Blocks and Win Your Inner Creative Battles by Steven Pressfield. He's an author, but he's not only talking about our roadblocks to writing books, he's addressing anything we want to create that might elicit resistance, like writing, starting a project, building a business, working on long-term growth, creating something to help others. The list is kind of endless. The book itself is a short, slim, pithy little thing. It's 5 inches by 8 inches. It is 165 pages with chapters that could be a single sentence, a single paragraph, maybe 2 to 3 pages. It's all across, but they're very tight. So if one of your procrastination battles is getting yourself to read books, this is an easy win. So for me right now, resistance and procrastination relates to writing. But what about you, Tracy? What kinds of things did this book make you think of in terms of the issue of resistance?
Yes. So you told me about this book. Oh, you can't see it. The War of Art. And I could not put this book down. I literally read it in one sitting. And it was just really speaking to me because I do have a project that I've been working on and I have been procrastinating on it. And like, as you know about me, Elizabeth, I actually tend to be pretty good about starting projects and just kind of working through the lack of clarity sometimes we have and setting up an outline. But for whatever reason, this particular project I've been procrastinating a lot. So this has really helped. This book really helped me talk through the blocks that I'm running into and why. And I'll be honest, the War of Art, it really is about the internal war we have in ourselves about our art. And it really resonated with me also because I never have thought of myself as an artist per se. You think of artists like painters and sculptors and pottery makers, but in reality, I am an artist because I do create content. I do create materials and training and experiences to help others grow. And I actually like that label for myself.
I think you should get used to that. I mean, you didn't list that you are the creator of 2 rap spoof lean videos. I think you are absolutely an artist there. But all across the board, Tracy, I agree. And I feel like kind of what you mentioned, it's around more resistance within ourselves if it's something we really care about. So I feel like the more important something is to us, then I feel like the resistance level goes up. And for me, as usual, I wrote all over this book, and I do that with most nonfiction books. So I'll
Me
share some
too.
passages or some takeaways that kind of resonated for me.
Mhm.
One of them is that resistance comes from within, which means we're the only ones who can do anything about it. Um, and this thing he said that really resonated, fear doesn't go away. And that spoke to me because I remember being so afraid before going on stage to do improv every single time. And that kind of fear provided energy. And with other things that I do, it makes me prepare, it makes me do my homework. I want to make sure I set myself up for success. And he talks about doing battle, right? The whole metaphor here is that, it's a war every day, but I've made my peace with the role of fear. And then he calls resistance self-sabotage, again, more war, but other people can aid and abet us in a bad way, right? So maybe they want our company, right? So they discourage us from writing or tackling whatever the project is that we're trying to do. And on that point, our job is to be a good ally, for other people. And I feel like, Tracy, you and I are good allies, which is awesome. But what kinds of quotes stood out to you or messages?
Well, I'm really glad I did sit down and read through the entire book because my absolute favorite quotes were on the last 2 pages of the whole book. And they really, really spoke to me. One of them talks about the portrait of an artist.
Mm.
And, I'm going to say, honestly, I think people struggle with this in general, but in particular, I think women struggle with this a little bit more is this whole idea of self-promotion. So
Yeah.
we do art, we create things, and then it's this idea of self-promotion that feels, I think, slightly uncomfortable for me. Actually, in some things, I am totally happy to promote other people and all their stuff and their
Yeah.
conferences and their webinars. But if it's me, I sort of to feel like a little uncomfortable because I'm like, me, look at me.
Oh,
And there's some sort of discomfort in that. And it's funny you mentioned the parody music videos that I created because I have an alias, Miss Fix-a-Lot. And somehow I love talking about her because it's almost like she's not me. Right? But what I love about these quotes is it talks about the artist is really not necessarily the source of the creation they bring into being. They are a facilitator and they carry and they are willing and skilled instruments of a higher universe, if you will, that they're
mm,
serving. And that really resonated with me because yes, I mean, we are inspired by certain things, and if we could create more things for our universe that is going to improve the community or improve problem solving across the universe, I mean that just is really a beautiful thing. And then the
yeah.
last one I'll share is the last page called The Artist's Life. And it's really talking about how creative work is not a selfish act or for the actor. It's not a bid for attention. It's a gift to the world and every being in it. And it said, don't cheat us of your contributions. Give us what you got. And I was like, wow. That really spoke to me. And I'm like, yeah, I got something to contribute.
I love that you picked that out and you told me about it because it's something that I've said to other people. Like, don't cheat us. Like, the world needs to hear what you have to, you have contributions to make, that same sentiment, give us what you got. But I don't, it's not like that whole issue you brought up, like we don't want to toot our own horn, so we don't turn that on ourselves, like give the world what you got. And then let me see if it's next to me right here. Yeah, let me just grab this because I think it's might
Okay.
be on our list. Now that you mention it, we'll see if this comes up in our reading because I'm Tracy. Now you and I are in the middle of a bunch of books, but
We
Brag,
are.
the Art of Tooting Your Own Horn without blowing it. How about that for a good title?
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
So we'll see. That might come up on the at the cafe. But
Yes.
I also liked how he framed self-doubt as an ally, right? You kind of feel like self-doubt is this thing you should eradicate, but he sees it as an indicator of aspiration, right? Doubting makes us work to reach an ideal. I could definitely feel that. It's the what could I do differently? How can I do better? And that's part of our whole continuous improvement industry. So that got me.
Mhm.
And I think mainly it was enlightening to hear all of his descriptions of things that can constitute resistance, like little
Mhm.
things like dredging up old slights or injustices. Like you can waste a lot of energy there, or we might be prone to accidents or messing up or showing up late. Like all these ways we get ourselves stuck, right? And then I like his chapters toward the end about turning pro. And that
Mhm.
means setting a schedule, making time, treating your creations, whatever those are, like they're important, right? Another thing to be wary of setting unrealistic timetables. Been there. So, I'm mindful that everything might take twice as long as we think it will. And what kinds of things did you take away from the book? Even if it's one thing, what do you think you'll do differently?
Well, you kind of nailed it already in what you just said as well. I think the other thing that resonated with me is the most important thing we can do, because again, like you said, resistance is always sort of making you procrastinate, whatever it is. And I know that there's some things like I'm great at putting a PowerPoint presentation together, but it takes me a lot longer to write a blog as an example. It just doesn't come as naturally to me. And so I find that I get up a lot more often to take more breaks when I'm actually writing a blog than if I'm putting a PowerPoint presentation together. And so recognizing that there's more resistance in different kinds of things you create. And again, what I thought resonated with me a lot is just sit down and make time to create
Mm,
and literally put it on your calendar. And if I look at so I told you about this project I'm working on, and a lot of it is that I have to sit down and actually just get some work done and kind of just start. I just have to
mm,
start. And in reality, I haven't put a lot of time on my calendar to get it started. And
mm.
it just seems like things keep getting in the way. And I've got some of these excuses in my head about, well, I don't know how to use this software and I don't know how to use this program. So therefore I have to learn that first. And I mean, this is probably one of the slowest starts I've ever had on something, right?
Because it's important.
Yeah, but it is important. And I really, my next step for this particular project that I'm working on is to make time on my calendar and stop filling it.
Love it.
Yeah. So pick it up if you are interested. The War of Art is a great read, very inspiring, and I'd highly recommend just sneaking away in a morning and reading through it because it's small enough to do.
Here, here. I'm Elizabeth Swan, and you're listening to the Just in Time Cafe podcast. In a short while, you get to hear our interview with Tracy Defoe, master educator and Kata coach.
Up next is Q&A.
Today's question is, what do you do when leadership won't let go of the reins? What are the ideals in a good problem-solving culture is that you are building an organization of problem solvers at all levels. And if leaders insist on shouldering the burdens themselves, they miss out on developing others. Leaders get stuck there for a lot of reasons. They feel responsible. They don't think it'll be done as well if they don't do it themselves, or they're just in the habit of doing the job or solving the problem. There's dozens of reasons, but it can be stifling to an entire culture. When people don't feel like they're growing, they feel stagnated, which often results in good people going off to find better growth opportunities. This has to be familiar to you, Tracy.
Absolutely. And we do see it a lot. And I think sometimes one of the challenges that that leaders have is awareness that they're doing it, surprisingly. I mean, I don't think leaders realize how often they're doing something that can be damaging to their team. They're not as aware as we would like them to be. So you have very you have some leaders that are very self-aware, and then others that have they're a little different on where they are in terms of awareness. And when I see people are not growing people, it's really, a lot of it is they need to get to the awareness that they're doing it before they're going to make a change.
Yeah.
And so then and now we're working on getting them to see themselves and the impact of that. So often it could be like a 360-degree feedback. Like the leadership challenge is a leadership course that I've taken, and you get 360-degree feedback from your peers, as well as people that report to you. And I will say that, I mean, some leaders are very surprised at some of the constructive feedback. First, they're in denial. They're like, wait, is this about me? I don't think this is about me.
Did these get mixed up?
Yeah, I think this is somebody else's responses, right? And then they kind of get into this sort of awakening of, oh, I didn't realize I'm having this. And then they are now paying attention. They're a good student because they realize the impact. What would you say is one thing that leaders could be doing to not take all the responsibility?
Yeah. Well, you raise a great point about awareness, and that's probably job one. And I was thinking another thing is that if leaders can somehow either experience or get the idea that they'd be less burdened, if they didn't assume the onus was all on them, right? And that's a liberation, right? Which can feel awkward at first, like, well, oh, I'm not doing this. But then you don't have that like shoulder sagging feeling, and that's heavy, right? And I know a lot of people in leadership feel that, like it leads to burnout. So if you do give up some of the ownership, then you're free to lead, right? And that might not occur to them. So I think about what kinds of questions could you ask someone, right, to address this, right? So at a high level, one of the things you could do is measure leaders or ask how they're doing at things like providing direction or inspiring others or supporting others, right? One question could be like, how many learning opportunities have you provided the people who work for you? A question they can ask themselves is there anyone else who could take this task on, even if that person would be new to it? Because then once again, that would be an opportunity. You could help support them. And another question might be, how many tasks or issues have you liberated yourself from while providing an opportunity for another? Like, it's starting to measure yourself on these. And obviously there has to be some leadership buy-in somewhere for this to work. You need to find that window where there's someone ready to listen. So I know it's tricky, but Tracy, what are some ways that you've seen work?
Well, again, if I had to talk about the awareness part, right? So self-reflection can be very helpful to get people's awareness up about how they're leading. But I also think gathering feedback on something specific. So if you are looking to empower others on certain projects, asking feedback on how it's going. Do you need more or less support? And what could I be doing differently to help you? And I think, you can't always ask everybody that. Sometimes people are just not going to want to share with you, constructive feedback if they report to you, because they're going to be a little worried about negative retribution. So you have to be sort of careful. But I feel like if you are not comfortable as a leader still, you got to start somewhere to, consider something lower risk, right? So if you have something you want done but it's not high urgency that your boss wants, don't give someone that, but you need to work on confidence in your team. And however that looks, maybe just start somewhere, give them something, and maybe it's a lower area of risk. And, and then ask it how you did as a support person for that person. So I feel like that is helpful, but I feel like the most the most impactful thing, and I'm actually basing this on some feedback that I did get from a leader who did feel like she was a micromanager. At the time, she didn't think she was. And then she had this aha moment. Part of it was some feedback that she got that she would give projects out to her team and then take them back. And this was a pattern that they kept seeing her do. And so her people just stopped trying.
Yeah.
And she suddenly saw that it was her behavior that was creating this. And she completely did a 180 after that, which was great. And you don't always have those aha moments too. We're all on a journey for leadership. There's a lot of leaders that are on their journey. And the hope is that they see that that's an opportunity and they're more motivated to make change.
Yeah. I feel like this is something that goes on in so many seemingly enlightened cultures, you know? It's a really human reaction. Like you said, we may or may not be aware of what we're doing. And the will to do something yourself is, you know, could be very strong. But the more you invite others into the action, the stronger the workforce and the more involvement and buy-in you get. I heard this story a long time ago about President Carter spending the whole weekend working on and figuring out the federal budget all by himself. And then he presented it to the cabinet on Monday and nobody was interested and they basically had to redo it all together. So pulling others in is more efficient, right? And that's one of our buzzwords, efficiency. Anyway, we'll continue on this one. I think it's such a rich topic, but
it is. I'm Tracy O'Rourke, and you're listening to the Just in Time Cafe podcast. We host these monthly, so you can go to www.jitcafe.com and go to our podcast page.
Coming up next is an interview with our featured guest, Tracy Defoe. Tracy O'Rourke, why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about Tracy Defoe?
Absolutely. So Tracy is an improvement and coaching Kata learner and coach from Vancouver, British Columbia. She's the volunteer host of the Cascadia Kata Dojo Community Call and a California adult education professional specializing in learning at work. I was going to say leaning at work. She's interested in culture change, supporting peer leadership, informal learning, multiple literacies, and communication in diverse settings. She is an absolute powerhouse, and she's also a fan of pickleball. So she has come down to San Diego, and we've been able to meet up a few times. One time we just went to lunch, and then the other time we actually played pickleball too. So we are honored to have her on the courts and at the cafe.
Smoking hot skills.
Hi, Tracy. We are so happy to have you at the cafe. I'm so excited to get you back here at the Just in Time Cafe. We are very excited. And we've got a couple of questions for you because we just want to pick at your brain today because you have a big brain.
Well, it's a good brain. And it's a revered brain. And we are so psyched to have you, Tracy. We have known each other through the Women in Lean Network. You've obviously been a guest at the cafe before. And most recently, you joined the editorial board for the second edition of Tracy's and my book, Tracy O'Rourke and my book, The Problem Solver's Toolkit. And your feedback sparked us to bring you back to the cafe.
Well, I'm delighted to be here. So thank you for having me, and let's get into it.
Okay, so I guess first off, like, how would you describe yourself to someone, like encompassing at least several of the favorite things you like to dabble in?
Well, I always describe myself first as an adult educator. So I have a long career in adult education, and I'm particularly I've always been really interested in blue collar education, whereas most people in our field are interested in management education. And that took me into how do people teach lean, and how do people teach their culture, and how do managers manage their culture. So I expanded from my interest in blue collar workers to everybody in a workplace. And those people took me through the kind of things you would associate with being a lean or consultant. For the last 10 years or so, I've been a Kata coach and a Kata learner. And most people on like LinkedIn sort of places might know me from two volunteer groups I started during COVID that are still growing worldwide. One of them is the Kata Girl Geeks, which is a women's group, women supporting women in learning to be Kata coaches and learning scientific thinking and applying it together on a daily basis. And the other one is Kata School Cascadia, which is one of the worldwide places where Kata coaches get together to learn and commiserate and grow and have community.
Well, you are so good at reading manuscripts. I was wondering if that was one of your favorite things.
Well, I have a pretty long history of creating adult education programs, and I was very fortunate that one of my editors was a plain language expert. And from Diana, shout out Diana Bodnar, who's now a TV producer, I developed quite a lot of, I don't know, basic foundational skills in that. And yeah, I edit and read and actually used to teach. One of my sidelines, my side gigs for a long time was clear design and clear language. And I teach a few workshops on that. I actually retired from that I started telling people a year ago I retired from it, and people have stopped asking me to do it. So that actually works. And I also retired from university teaching about a year ago, but I'm keeping up all the Kata stuff. So yes, I have I also taught English. I taught English at UBC for 10 years. So, and that included technical writing. So yeah, I have a red pen, a purple pen, and I knew all those publisher symbols that you write to say, please put a line here, oh, extra space, stuff like that.
That is a stunning pedigree. And I had never heard of what you called your side gig, the clear design and plain language.
Yes.
Can you describe that a little bit? I just think that's so fascinating.
Oh, well, sure. I would love to tell you about that. So, if you understand how people read, right, which is what I usually teach people in my little workshop, which I think I did one once for Women in Lean, and you attended it, Elizabeth. Then there are things we know about how people read that can make the page that you put in front of them more accessible or less accessible.
I do remember this.
Some of them relate to how much white space there is. Some of them relate to the difference in size between headers and regular text. Also the fonts you choose, where you put illustration, how much text is around them. I think you will have noticed on one of yours, I said, I would unbold this text. It'll be easier to read. A lot of the times bolding distorts the space between letters and makes it harder. And it's not just easier for people who are not great readers. It's actually easier for those of us who can glance at a page and remember it. You just are doing what does the eyeball and what does the brain do? And can we optimize a page for that? So that's clear design. And clear design you can learn in an hour. I mean, the basics of clear design, it's what I teach the most, because plain language involves word choice and editing. It takes a little slower to learn.
Okay, now I completely remember what you're talking about. And I remember putting together an infographic, and I just grabbed a template off of Canva, the graphic program.
Yes.
And you pointed out that it forced us to go kind of left, right, left, right. It was this weird
zigzag
kind of design element that you were like, that doesn't help take it in. And that was instructive to me. I remembered that. I held on to that.
I have a whole thing in my little workshop, which maybe I should run again after this runs, because people like to know it and they feel like they can use it right away. So the Canva thing, the templates they give you on Canva are designed to look cool.
Yeah.
This does not mean anyone will read the information. And so I, for example, say, like, if you're going to use a really cool font for a heading, repeat those words. That's the first words in the paragraph, because actually if you're able to read, you can't stop yourself from reading the words in the paragraph. You will read them, but you may not have appreciated that text because you might think of it as art, not as, like, you'll take it as a graphic, not as meaningful information I'm supposed to read and retain. People don't retain that at all. Anyway.
That's
very interesting.
Yeah.
I don't know why they don't teach everyone that. Like when we teach English 100 or English 12, we don't teach everyone the clear design concepts. So because they're useful like for everybody.
Yeah, I did have a book editor for my book tell me, Yeah, the chapter title, whatever you're saying, you're gonna have to repeat that. It's in a graphic above, but you're gonna have to
Yes,
repeat
have
it.
to repeat it. Yeah. And we spent, I don't know how much time we have, but the literacy ladies of the world spent quite a bit of time trying to get Microsoft to change the defaults to make them support reading. So now they did. So now the default line space is 1.2 or 1.25, which is good. And they aren't always as great with the headers, but at least the headers and the main text will be different fonts.
Mm.
But you should know that Calibri and whatever the header font for Calibri is are made for digital reading, not paper reading. And it's different. I could go on about this for a long time.
Good.
So we should probably move along.
Yeah. So I have a question for you. So one of the things that really stood out to Elizabeth and I is you gave us some feedback on our book. It was surrounding the topic of working with stakeholders, and we gave the reader choices of ways to categorize the people who would be impacted by change to the process: supporter, neutral, resistor. And we were alerting the problem solver to the fact that they may experience resistance to change. And you kind of pushed back on the label of resistor, and you gave us a more positive
Yes.
label, if you will. So
Yes.
can you describe to our listeners what it was and why you pushed back?
Well, resistance, first of all, it's a big part of what we teach people in adult educational literacy learning at the foundational levels. And what we always say is resistance is expected, right? It's not a bad thing. We expect it. And when when people push back, we know that somehow we are close to something real for them, whether it's real emotional, perhaps based on prior experience or knowledge. And all learning involves change. So we have a saying actually in the literacy community that we honor resistance, right? So when you were saying, okay, hey, are you on board or not on board? I was like, I would love to frame that in a more positive way. So some people are, yes, let's go. Even I'm on the committee or something. Some people are probably in the maybe. And I used to teach a 2-day course on understanding your work culture. And we used to go through a little framework there, which was the maybe people. So the yes people, the maybe people, and the not yet people. So they need to hear different things and have different experiences to move from this isn't going to happen for me. No, thank you. I like to think of them as not yet because as a educator, I'm hopeful about people moving to maybe and yes. And it seemed to me that if people in continuous improvement think of the people who aren't ready to embrace change as resistors, they might have a different attitude toward them. And it was that I was trying to say, let's be positive when we label people so that we are open to them being positive. And if you'll indulge me in a small side story, in one point in my career, I worked a lot with the forest industry here in British Columbia, both the management side and the union side. And in that work, I had a pretty close working relationship with the head of the Woodworkers Union. And he taught me, I learned from him because we were introducing massive legal legislative change of what you could do in the forest. You can't drive through a creek anymore. You can't fill a log across a creek because it would, as one guy said, squish the fish. So you don't want to hurt the bugs and squish the fish. And these are all new rules. They're environmental rules. And I was developing the curriculum. And I was trying to figure out, anyway, he came back from a meeting and I was sort of disappointed that he hadn't got very far in explaining the changes and why we were doing them. And I had this big rationale. And he said to me, and this is really important, I think, for all continuous improvement people or people on that committee, he said, I go to all these meetings and I heard it all and I was part of making that. So I'm there for you. But these guys, they're way back. They haven't been through the thinking. They weren't part of it. They're not there. I can't get them from, hey, I'm so excited about how this is going to keep our industry going for another 50 years because we're going to be the most environmentally conscious loggers in the world. And he says, I got to bring them along bit by bit and take them to the point where they have the same information as me. And so I thought, okay, like that's an excellent way to think about resistance, right? They don't have the information. So people who or they haven't had the experience, haven't been in the meeting, they haven't heard the back and forth, all that stuff in order to get buy-in, right? So people kind of buy in. And I've been thinking about that when I'm walking my dog. And since you said you wanted to talk more about it, because I think a lot of the time when people say, that's fine for those people over there, but not for us, which, you know, you get sometimes, or the young guys can do that, but us old guys aren't going to do it. You know, I think people are rationally operating from prior knowledge of how things work in their workplace, right? Like they've had that experience before. And so there's some unlearning to do, like, you know, do we really mean it when we say it, that kind of thing. And there's also a sense of belonging or participation. You know, they have to know that this is for them. And so I think there's things you can do as the CI team or the team lead. If you keep thinking, oh, these ones just aren't there yet. That's all. And that's how I think about it.
I like it because it sort of talks about, well, I say, let's be curious, right? Be curious about it as opposed to cop an attitude about resistors, right? So I feel like that label promotes, be curious. Why are they not there yet? Is it something specific? So you're in this curiosity mindset now of really listening, in my opinion. So I really love this label. I'm stealing it from you.
Yes, I'm glad. And I actually, you know, I made it up a little bit during when you said the email, because I said, let's call them not yetsters. It's just like whatever you want to call them. It's like keep the door open. And you know, a friend of mine who's a Star Wars person used to, or maybe it's not Star Wars, it's the other one.
The other one.
The Resistance, the Borg, right?
Star Trek.
The Borg. Star Trek. Yeah, in Star Trek, the Borg people, the Borg, whatever they are, robot people say resistance is futile, that they will assimilate you, right? But in in literacy work, in adult education, we say resistance is expected. And then when I say we honor it, like that just means literally we listen. Tell me the story. Why is this such a mismatch for you? What have the experiences been? And okay, so let's look into that. Let's look and see how are things going. And I I expect that to take time. So I wouldn't necessarily always hold up a big improvement, but you still want to bring the people along and manage the people. I'm sure you both could say, as I could say, I've seen skeptical frontline workers become super enthusiastic about continuous improvement when they experience a good one, right?
Yes.
I feel like this also, back to how you were describing, this is education, right? You can't take someone from a beginner to an expert in one step, right? And so you're treating your stakeholders as if they were beginners and it's your job to educate. So you have to do it in steps that they can take in and get to the next level. Just like the logger or the forestry guy you were talking about. He was like, I'm out here, but they're over here. I can't just put this there and expect them to make that big leap.
Right. Yeah. And I think actually you've hit on the unexpressed secret of my consultancy, Elizabeth, which I'm happy to share with everyone, which is when I get in front of a committee, I treat them like a class. And I think, what are these people trying to learn together? And how can I make it easier for them to learn
it? That's the secret's out, because
I know
going
now
on the
everybody
airwaves.
will do it. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think about like Tracy O'Rourke, something that she's kind of pulled me into years ago that's I've taken on as a big educating step is the process walk. Like Tracy, I think you made me see like that's a place where education happens, both for the people on the walk, the people like you always push like everyone has to be on it, right? This can't be like you just learn what someone does. Like everyone has to learn.
You can't tell somebody what you saw. They need to see it. It doesn't have to be everybody in that department, but they need to be a representative from that department. Because seeing it is different than hearing about it and telling people about it.
Yeah, there's a great, I don't know if it's a Toyota saying, but back when I used to actually teach lean, I remember we see together, we know together, we understand together, right? Like those three things. Yeah.
Yes, a shared understanding helps us. Like I always feel like, oh, most of the time with process walks, they had no idea
But
what the process was. They're like, oh, and now we have a shared understanding. Now what do we do about it? So, but
And
the thing going back to change though, um, so I'm surprised about two things still is, I think what you said, resistance is expected in education. Um, it's really interesting how, with when I see green belts do projects, it's very surprising sometimes to me how they weren't expecting resistance. They sort of expect people to just fall in line, people. And then when they get resistance, they actually are surprised, which also tells me that they're not doing the work, like you say, about checking in with people, seeing how people feel about things, bringing them along, brainstorming the solutions and ideas to the root causes, not just coming up with the solution yourself. So, there's an element of maybe they could have done a few things differently, but I'm still surprised that people are surprised that they have resistance.
well, I think if you thought up the idea, it's so blindingly obvious to you that this needs to happen that it's just hard to imagine that someone's been working there and not seen that. There's one other thing I just wanted to add, which is that stressed brains don't learn very well. So
Mhm.
if you are trying to improve a place where, maybe how the work is organized is stressful in itself, or perhaps the coworker work environment or how they're managed creates like daily stress, then you probably have to get people into a psychologically safe place before they're willing to budge at all, or else they'll just blow up at you. And
Yeah.
so I think that learning if you're going to be a continuous improvement change maker, learning to create psychological safety and stick to that as a value, I think is a big part of getting cooperation. I mean, when I go into a factory and they want to do something, I always say, please send me to the workers you're afraid to go talk to. I will
Mhm.
talk to those old guys who you don't even want, you're not even planning on changing them.
Yeah.
And when I bring them over, the whole factory will follow. Yeah.
Exactly. I feel the same way. I want the biggest resistor that's the biggest influencer. Bring them on
Yeah.
down
Bring them
because
on.
there's reasons, I mean, people listen to them.
It's a social practice, right? They're often informal social leaders, and all about this is a social thing. So you definitely want to get in front of it
Mm.
and not not
Yes.
behind.
I want to come back to the phrase not yet stirs or not yet, and the underlying message of hope there
Mhm.
that is very appealing, I think, on many levels, right? Like you're saying, Tracy, it takes away that kind of more unenthusiastic label
Well,
or
like people who aren't on the team, right? Or
yeah,
they start getting Yeah, I think you get labeled. And if you're
you
going to
get
label, let's label hopefully.
yeah,
Uh-huh.
let's label. I love that.
Yeah.
Uh,
You
and
know, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, Elizabeth. What were you going
no,
to
you
say?
go, Tracy.
We talked about how that label creates curiosity. I also think it helps create empathy
Mm,
Mm.
because you think, oh, what's going on with them? So I know that one of the things I've seen over the years is people reacting to change when there's a considerable amount of loss for them. So a
mm,
good example, I'll just share a quick story, is I have an organization I'm working with, and one department, very large department, had a continuous improvement group, and they were going to bring that group into the overarching continuous improvement group of the whole company, right?
Mhm.
Sounds great, right? More support. Well, the department head flipped out. Why? Because he was just about to lose his entire staff of continuous improvement.
Mhm.
I mean, so like, let's think through what people are losing. And, because there's probably some sort of factor going on there
Yeah.
about specific change, uh, creating a significant amount of loss in their mind, whether it's true
mm,
or not.
yeah,
So empathy and curiosity is why I love this title.
Yeah.
yeah.
Mhm.
I'm with you. And the other thing that I find in it, and I'm Tracy Defoe. Have you read Is it Carol Dweck who wrote Mindset?
Oh, okay. Probably. I
And
pulled 3 books today in case we were going to talk about books, but that's not one of them.
well, I read it a while back, but I recently watched a TED Talk of hers, and she was using the concept of not yet in another way,
Mm.
kind of saying in terms of that you haven't failed or you haven't not reached it's not that you failed to reach your goal, it's that you haven't reached it yet.
Yes,
And
that's where the I don't know Yeti comes from, right?
oh, right. Okay,
For
great.
Cascadia, that's where we come from there.
Okay.
And we were talking one day, that's our mascot is a Yeti, and it's called I don't know Yeti. And we were talking about the absolute power of always adding the word yet to I don't know. And how whether you're a coach or a parent or a friend, if you get if somebody's hit a skill or knowledge or practice barrier, you just don't know yet. But you can learn, you can try, you can get there, right? And so that's the origin of that. And there's a lot of books now about the power of yet. There's kids books, it's a big it's a
Wonderful.
very powerful idea and simple idea.
It is. It's so simple, and you brought it into an arena that, I hadn't expected. And I was like, once again, like you said, the power of that simple word, yet.
Mm-hmm.
That's big.
Mhm.
It's so big.
And I think
Um,
also to Tracy's comment about it being empathetic, it's inclusive in a way that the calling somebody a resistor is not inclusive. So it
yeah.
still keeps them as us. And I think that's very powerful. The sense of belonging is really important to people learning or feeling like it's okay to share their opinion. Like what you don't want is underground resistance, right? That's what you don't want. So I think there's a lot there around the psychological safety of being able to say, I need to know more, or I need to see this work first, or something like
mm,
that.
mm.
And you can
Yeah.
even teach people that those are appropriate things to say, right? How are you feeling? Are you feeling I need to know more? Are you feeling this may work in other departments, but I'm not sure it'll work here? That stuff like that.
Uh-huh. Yes. That's exciting. I love it. But I want to get a shirt now. Anyway.
Just says not yet.
Yeah. Yeah. It's one of the exercises I do sometimes with the team, and maybe the listeners will try it, is I just get people to say, can you think of a time when you didn't feel included, right? Or supported at work? When did you not feel supported? And the stories that will come out are very dramatic. And then what small change could we have done that would make you feel like you were included? So you can go forward with that idea. It's very important for managers to understand that little things like a sticky note in their wall that says resistors and has my name on it is going to make me feel unincluded, right?
Yeah.
Whereas we could just say, still working on it, or not yet, doesn't have all the information yet to agree to this change. It's a big deal.
That's a great point, Tracy. As a matter of fact, I was just thinking as you were saying that we need to change our stakeholder analysis template because I think it does say resistor.
It does.
We have told people don't leave that hanging in the break room or in the working room, because if somebody comes by and they see an X by their name, but if they said not yetsters, it's not as threatening. Like, well, you're not there yet. It's okay.
Yeah.
It's a position. It's not a noun. It's an adjective.
Yeah, I wrote that in the comment in my manuscript comments that if you have to hide it, you probably should rethink it.
Uh-huh. Yep. Yep.
Well said, Tracy Defoe.
Well, thank you so much for asking.
Absolutely. So Tracy, is there anything we didn't ask you want to share with the audience before we wrap up?
No, but I think, well, maybe like summary comment. Sometimes put your educator glasses on or your teacher glasses, right? Yeah. and just think like, or put your empathy glasses on, like as Tracy pointed out, and think, how would this feel from the other side? And I think if we could all adapt and promote a not yet attitude, the world would be a little bit less judgy place.
Yeah, we need less judgment. That's for sure.
Well, Tracy, you are wise and wonderful, and I'm thrilled that you sparked this discussion, and I'm thrilled you got to come back to the cafe.
Yeah.
And if somebody wanted to tap some of that wonderful wisdom, how would they get in touch with you?
Oh, my company or my consulting is called The Learning Factor.
Mhm.
And I'm easy to find at thelearningfactor.com if you're, or .ca is Canada address. And also I'm on LinkedIn, easy to find because my name, I don't believe there's anyone else with my two spellings. So I'm Tracy without an E, as Tracy O'Rourke will specify, is the least
Preferred.
fussy name. Yeah, it's the standard name. And also my Defoe is Defoe, like the guy who wrote Robinson Crusoe. So
Not Daniel the actor.
not Daniel, the actor who's a DA. That's right, Defoe. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Um, well,
Well,
go ahead, Tracy.
well, I would just say that it was lovely having you at the cafe, and I can't wait till you come back to San Diego so we can play some more pickleball.
I'll see you in February, sister.
Dang it, I gotta practice and get out there.
Yes.
Yes.
All right, guys.
Thank
Hasta.
you.
Be sure to register for our December 19th webinar, Lean into AI Using Artificial Intelligence to Transform Your Work. Lean entrepreneur Jessica Blake is going to show us how to use AI as another tool for problem solving. And I'm always interested because the AI field is always changing and always come up with new stuff. So join us and we'll leave you the registration link.
And if you did not catch the last webinar, Jen Tankenow, she provided a fantastic guide for encouraging others to engage in using PDCA, PDSA, however you use it. But she gave us really simple and gave us a great case study based on using it in the home. It was very successful.
And if you didn't know already, Elizabeth and I wrote a book, The Problem Solver's Toolkit, a few years ago, and we are working on the second edition of that book. It's coming out early 2025. I am so excited. We've actually changed the cover. We've added some new tools and templates and bonus guides, and we're going to have some stuff on our website for additional support. And I am really, really excited about this. It's been a long time coming, and I can't stop talking about it because we're so close to the finish line. So,
Woohoo!
yeah. So stay tuned for all the news by joining our community at the Just in Time Cafe.
Thanks for joining me and Tracy for another fantastic year of discovery. You are our favorite thing about the Just in Time Cafe, and we look forward to being your lifelong learning partners.
Join us next year and every month for your jolt of lean caffeine.